The silence was the first thing I noticed. It wasn't an empty silence, but a full one, thick and textured, settling into the spaces where noise used to be. When Melissa packed the car, buckled our two kids into their seats, and drove off toward the promise of the beach, a hum of freedom resonated in my chest. It wasn't the wild, chaotic buzz of a bachelor party weekend, but something far more precious: peace, space, the simple, unadulterated luxury of being able to breathe without interruption. For years, the house had been a symphony of domestic chaos. The high-pitched theme song of a morning cartoon, the percussive clatter of Lego bricks spilling across the hardwood floor, the endless negotiations over bedtime. Now, there was only the low hum of the refrigerator and the gentle ticking of the clock in the hall. I stood in the living room, a space usually littered with toy landmines and discarded juice boxes, and saw only clean lines and uncluttered surfaces. 3 full days, 72 hours to catch up on a mountain of work, to think in complete sentences, to simply be. Melissa had orchestrated this trip with the precision of a military general. "The kids need a real break, Tom," she'd said, her voice filled with a determined sort of cheerfulness. Sandcastles, sunblock, seashells, the whole 9 yards. I'd stayed behind, citing overdue projects and looming deadlines as my excuse. But deep down, a part of me I didn't want to acknowledge looked forward to the stillness more than I wanted to admit. It felt like a betrayal to crave solitude from the very people who defined my world. But the craving was there, a persistent ache for quiet. That first night alone, I was lost in a sea of spreadsheets, the numbers blurring together on the screen. I had a glass of whiskey on the desk beside me, something I rarely did on a weeknight. It felt decadent. The house was mine. The time was mine. And then, a knock at the door, sharp, fast, insistent, not the kind you ignore. It was my neighbor, Eric. He lived 2 houses down, a retired man whose hobby had become the unofficial surveillance of our quiet suburban street. Eric wasn't malicious, just aware. He knew whose lawn service was late, which teenager had a new car, and when a package sat on a porch for too long, he was the neighborhood's walking, talking security system. Tonight, though, he looked different, wired. His eyes, usually crinkled in a friendly squint, were wide and darted past me into the empty hallway. "Hey, man," he said, his voice a low, urgent hum. "Just finished setting up some new cameras around the house. Got one facing the front porch now. Feel safer, you know." I nodded politely, mustering a smile. "That's great, Eric. Good to be careful." Honestly, it sounded like overkill. We lived on a cul-de-sac where the most exciting event of the year was the annual block party. But Eric didn't back away. He leaned in, his gaze intense. "With your wife and kids out of town, you should do it too," he pressed. His breath smelled faintly of peppermint. "You think it's safe until it's not. One of my buddies over on Maple Street had a break-in last month. Didn't even know until half his stuff was gone. These new cameras, they let you check in from your phone. Live feed. It's peace of mind, man." He had that look in his eye, a self-satisfied certainty that he knew something about the world that I didn't. I laughed it off, told him I'd think about it, and closed the door, eager to return to my spreadsheets and my silence. But the idea, like a sticky burr, had attached itself to me. Later that night, as the house creaked and settled around me, the silence began to feel less like peace and more like vulnerability. I found myself scrolling through security systems online. I told myself it was just curiosity, a way to appease the nagging voice Eric had planted in my head. One system caught my eye. Small, wireless, simple. It promised setup in under an hour and a live stream straight to my phone. I hovered over the buy button for a long moment. Why was I doing this? Was it Eric's paranoia? Was the house feeling too quiet, too big? Or was it something else, a primal, unnameable instinct that already sensed a threat I couldn't yet see? I clicked the button. I didn't tell Melissa. It didn't even occur to me. It was a small, practical decision, like changing a light bulb or fixing a leaky faucet, a measure of control. When the cameras arrived 2 days later, I set them up with a strange, almost feverish urgency. One by the front door, tucked into the corner of the porch ceiling. One by the garage, angled to cover the driveway. Another facing the back patio door. The last one I placed in the living room, on top of a bookshelf, offering a wide view of the main living space. I tested the app on my phone, walking through the house and adjusting the angles until they were perfect. It all worked flawlessly. That night, I stood in the center of the living room and looked down at my phone screen. 4 silent, grayscale boxes, each showing a corner of my home, my life. It should have felt like control. It should have made me feel safe. Instead, looking at those sterile, watchful images, I felt a cold dread creep into my gut. It felt like I had just invited something into my house that I would never be able to unsee. Melissa and the kids returned 3 days later in a whirlwind of noise and chaotic energy. The second the door flew open, the house was filled again. Laughter, shoes kicked off and skittering across the floor, bags dumped in a heap by the stairs. Melissa hugged me, a long, tight embrace that smelled of sunscreen and salt water. She felt real, solid, a warm anchor in the silence I had grown accustomed to. The kids were sunburned and loud, their pockets full of seashells and their minds full of stories about giant waves and funny-looking crabs. It felt good. It felt like everything was back to normal. We slipped back into our routine with the ease of long practice. School runs, late nights at my desk, arguing good-naturedly about what to have for dinner, collapsing onto the couch to watch a movie. The cameras, my secret project from my weekend of solitude, were forgotten. They were just silent observers running in the background, their digital eyes a testament to a fleeting bout of paranoia. Then came a Tuesday morning, about a week later. I was at my office, staring at a contract, when a weird thought popped into my head, a random reminder that I hadn't checked the camera footage since they got home. It wasn't a suspicion, just pure idle curiosity. A novelty. I pulled out my phone, opened the app, and started scrolling back through the archive footage from the previous day. That's when I saw him. The timestamp showed 10:32 a.m. The kids were at school. Melissa was supposed to be home alone, working on her freelance graphic design projects. A man, tall, thin, wearing a plain gray hoodie and dark jeans, walked right through our front door. He didn't knock. He didn't hesitate. He entered like he owned the place. I stared at the screen, my breath catching in my throat. My office, with its humming computers and ringing phones, faded away. There was only the grainy image on my phone. He wasn't a delivery guy. He had no package, no clipboard. He didn't look like a repairman. He had no tools. He didn't look around like he was lost or uncertain. He moved with a slow, casual familiarity that made the hair on my arms stand up. I switched to the living room camera. I watched him drift from room to room. He ran a hand along the kitchen counter, a gesture so intimate and proprietary it made my stomach clench. He stood by the stairs for a long moment, just looking up, as if contemplating something. He never once looked at the camera. He stayed for about an hour. Then he walked out the front door as calmly as he had entered. I tried to breathe, to force my racing heart back into a normal rhythm. There has to be an explanation. Maybe Melissa scheduled a consultation for a home repair and forgot to mention it. Maybe he was a friend of a friend, dropping something off. But his body language, the way he touched our things, the way he occupied the space, it didn't feel right. It felt wrong on a fundamental level. That night, I said nothing. I sat beside Melissa on the couch, her head resting on my shoulder as we watched some mindless comedy. She laughed at the dumb jokes, her body shaking gently against mine. I smiled back, a hollow mask plastered on my face. Inside, my mind was a frantic loop, replaying that silent gray footage over and over. Who was he? She hadn't said a word. Not a single mention of anyone being in the house. If it was an innocent visit, why the silence? The next day, I checked the footage again. Nothing. The day after that, the same. I started to tell myself I was overthinking it, that my imagination, fueled by Eric's paranoia, was running wild. I was on the verge of letting it go, of dismissing it as a strange, unexplained anomaly. Then, 2 days later, he came back. Same man, same gray hoodie, same casual, confident walk, like he belonged there. Except this time, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. As he walked through the living room, he paused. He looked up, his face tilted just so, and he stared directly into the lens of the bookshelf camera, and then he smiled. I stared at the screen for a long, frozen minute, trying to decipher that smile. It wasn't a friendly smile. It wasn't smug or triumphant. It was quiet, knowing, and deeply unsettling. It was a smile that said, I know you're there. I see you, watching me. It was a smile of acknowledgement, a silent message passed from him to me through the ether, and then, as if nothing had happened, he just walked out of the frame. That smile stayed in my mind for hours after I closed the app. It burned behind my eyelids. The ambiguity was gone. This wasn't random. This was a message. I didn't confront Melissa. I wanted to. God, I wanted to throw the phone in her lap and demand an explanation. But some cold, calculating part of me, a part I didn't know existed, said to wait. I wasn't ready for her answer. whatever it might be. I wasn't ready for the inevitable lies or the tearful denials, so I kept quiet. I smiled. I played with the kids. I acted like I hadn't just seen a stranger walk through my home and communicate with me through a camera I'd installed without telling my wife. That night, I barely slept. I lay next to Melissa, listening to the soft rhythm of her breathing. Her hand rested on my chest, a familiar, comforting weight that now felt like a stone. I wanted to believe nothing was wrong. But that unease, the one I tried to push aside, had taken root and was now growing, its tendrils wrapping around my heart. I couldn't shake it. I couldn't ignore the slow, creeping suspicion that something terrible was happening right under my nose in my own house. The suspicion festered. It was a low-grade fever that colored every interaction, every shared meal, every goodnight kiss. The man's knowing smile was a brand on my memory. I was no longer just a husband. I was an observer, a spy in my own life. The line had been drawn, and I knew I had to cross it. The next morning before work, I did what the cold, methodical part of my brain knew I had to do. I ordered more cameras. This time they were smaller, more discreet. One designed to look like a USB charger, another so tiny it could be hidden in a houseplant. Better angles, I told myself. Complete coverage. The one for the bedroom, that one hurt the most. Ordering it felt like a profound betrayal, a violation of the most sacred space we shared. As I clicked confirm purchase, a wave of self-loathing washed over me. I was becoming the kind of man I despised. Suspicious, snooping, paranoid. But the need for the truth was a physical ache, a hunger that overshadowed everything else. I needed to know, even if knowing would cut me in half. I didn't say a word to Melissa. The lie of omission I had been telling myself that this was for security, for protection, crumbled into dust. This wasn't about burglars anymore. This was about her. I needed to know what was going on when I wasn't around. What she wasn't telling me. I needed to see it with my own eyes. The new cameras arrived in discreet brown packaging. That evening, while she was giving the kids their bath, I moved through the house like a phantom. One went in the living room, tucked into a bookshelf behind a row of paperbacks. Another in the hallway, disguised as an air freshener. The last one, the smallest one, went into the bedroom. I placed it on the nightstand, partially obscured by a framed photo of us, smiling on our honeymoon. The lens was no bigger than a pinhole. I checked the footage every morning after I got to work, my heart thudding with a mixture of dread and anticipation. For a few days there was nothing, just Melissa. I watched her move through the empty house, a silent film of her life. I saw her doing laundry, watching television on the couch with her feet tucked under her, scrolling endlessly through her phone while eating lunch at the kitchen table. It was excruciatingly normal. Nothing out of place, nothing suspicious. A part of me began to hope, to pray, that I had been wrong, that the man with the gray hoodie was a figment of my paranoid imagination. Then came the 7th day. The kids had already left for school. Melissa was home alone. I opened the app on my work computer, my morning ritual now, as ingrained as my first cup of coffee. I expected another quiet day of nothing. But there he was. Same hoodie, same confident walk, moving through my house like he'd been given a key. This time, he stayed longer. And what I saw next shattered the last remnants of my hope and flipped my world upside down. He walked into the bedroom, and Melissa followed him in. I didn't want to believe what I was seeing. A primal part of me screamed to shut off the screen, to throw the phone across the room and pretend this wasn't happening. But I couldn't. I had set this in motion. I had sought this truth. Now I was forced to watch it. I watched them standing there, in our bedroom. My bedroom. Melissa stood near the window, her arms crossed over her chest, a posture that tried and failed to look casual. The man didn't say much. He just stepped closer to her, slow and deliberate, like he'd done it 100 times before. They didn't touch, not this time. But the air between them was thick, with a shared history I knew nothing about. You could feel it, even through the grainy, silent camera feed. Then Melissa looked at him. She looked at him the way she used to look at me, years ago, when everything was still new and full of promise. And she smiled. Not a polite smile, not a friendly one. It was a smile filled with something intimate, something I hadn't seen from her in a very long time. They talked for a while. I couldn't hear what they were saying. I hadn't bought a camera with audio, a stupid, crucial mistake. But I didn't need to. Their body language said everything. The way she leaned toward him, the way he sat on the edge of our bed like it was his, like he belonged there. After 10 minutes, he left. Just like that. No kiss, no touch, just out the front door and gone. Melissa sat on the edge of the bed for a long while after that, staring at the floor. Then she got up, straightened the pillows he had sat on, and went to the kitchen to make a cup of tea, as if nothing had happened. That was the part that broke me. Not just that she had let him into our house, into our bedroom, but how easily she moved on after. The sheer normalcy of it. As if it wasn't a monumental betrayal. As if it was just another Tuesday. That night, I told her I wasn't feeling well and couldn't eat dinner. She didn't press, just told me to get some rest and kiss my forehead before tucking in the kids. That kiss burned my skin. I wanted to pull away, to recoil from her touch, but I couldn't move. I froze, some pathetic part of me still hoping this was all a huge mistake. I couldn't stop watching the footage. I became obsessed. I memorized her schedule. I knew when she left for errands, when she stayed home, when the kids were gone. I was living two lives, one where I pretended everything was fine, and one where I watched the truth of my shattered marriage unfold on a tiny screen. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew one thing for sure. The next time he came back, I needed more than video. I needed proof so clear, so absolute, that it couldn't be explained away. No excuses, no lies, just the truth, cold and undeniable. And I had a feeling it was coming soon. Sleep became a stranger. Every creak in the floorboards, every door closing in the night, would jolt me awake. My phone lay on the nightstand next to me, always charged, always ready. I checked the cameras like a devout man checks his prayers. In the morning, on my lunch break, even from the sterile privacy of a bathroom stall at work, I was addicted to the silence, waiting for it to break. Days passed. He didn't come back. A desperate, foolish hope began to bloom in the barren landscape of my mind. Maybe I'd imagined it all. Maybe it wasn't what I thought. Maybe he really was just a friend. I clung to those maybes like a drowning man grabs for a piece of driftwood, even though I knew they were hollow. The unease was a permanent resident in my soul now. It sat next to me at dinner. It followed me to work. Melissa had no clue. She laughed, made jokes, curled up against me in bed, her warmth a poisonous comfort. One night, I watched her reading, her hair tied up, glasses perched on her nose. She looked so familiar, so peaceful. And I hated that I couldn't trust a single thing about her anymore. The routine started again the next morning. Kids off to school, me off to work. The second I got to my desk, I logged into the camera feed, my pulse already a frantic drum in my ears. At first, everything was normal. Melissa in the kitchen, drinking coffee. Melissa in the living room, turning on the television. I fast-forwarded through the mundane minutes until around 11 a.m. And then it happened. He came back. Same hoodie, same confident gait, same calm demeanor, as if he had every right to be there. I watched him walk in, and this time, Melissa didn't look surprised at all. She was waiting in the hallway, phone in her hand, a small, welcoming smile on her face. There was no hesitation. They walked into the bedroom together, and this time, the door closed. I sat frozen at my desk, staring at the timestamp. My pulse thundered in my ears. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The camera in the hallway showed nothing but the silent, shut door. The bedroom feed was just a still, motionless image. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to see what I knew I would see. But I had asked for this. I had installed that camera. I had chosen to know. There was no going back. At 12:07 p.m., the door opened. He walked out first. Melissa followed a minute later. Her hair was down. She was wearing a different shirt. She walked to the kitchen and poured herself a glass of water with the casual air of someone who had just finished folding laundry. I sat at my desk, my phone in my hand, feeling the floor drop out from under me. I didn't move. I didn't speak. My entire body felt numb. It was real. All of it. That day, I didn't go home right after work. I sat in my truck in the office parking lot for over an hour, just staring at the steering wheel. I couldn't walk through that front door and pretend again. Not now. I needed to think. Melissa texted around 6 p.m. Everything okay? Should I start dinner? I stared at the message, my hands shaking. I typed back, running late, grab something without me. She replied with a heart emoji. The nerve of it, that calm, casual affection, as if she hadn't just invited another man into our bed. I drove to the lake and parked by the water's edge, watching the gray ripples under a gray sky. And that's when it truly landed. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was planned, repeated, normal for her, and she had hidden it perfectly. I wanted to confront her, to explode, to slap my phone down and make her watch. But I knew how she'd react. She'd cry. She'd twist the story. She might even blame me. Number. Not yet. I needed everything. That night, while she was upstairs reading, I stayed out in the garage and set a new plan in motion. I ordered 2 more cameras, better ones. One with a wider lens and high-definition night vision, the other, the size of a sugar cube, recorded high-quality audio. I was done with grainy images and silent movies. If she was going to keep doing this, I was going to capture every angle, every whisper, every lie. I installed them in the bedroom. One was placed high in the corner, hidden behind a decorative shelf. It covered the entire bed, clear as day. The second, smaller one went inside the nightstand drawer, with just the lens peeking through a tiny hole I drilled in the corner. That one would capture the sound. The next few days were a blur. I was an actor playing the role of a clueless husband. I checked the footage every night, scanning for signs. Then 4 days later, it happened again. Same man, same timing. This time, they didn't even bother with pretense. They went straight to the bedroom. And now, I had it all. Clear video, full sound, from every direction. Everything I needed. Everything she had hidden. I watched the footage in my office, the door locked. I didn't blink. The sound was clear, too clear. I could hear their voices, the low laughter. I could hear the way she whispered to him, words meant only for him, spoken in the bed we shared. It wasn't just physical, it was familiar, practiced, intimate. Then came the part that shattered what was left of my heart. They joked about me. "He's so predictable," I heard her say, her voice light with laughter. "He'd never catch on. He never really pays attention anyway." The man chuckled. "You're too smart for him." Then they made plans to meet again. Same day, next week. I sat back in my chair, every muscle in my body locked tight. The phone was still in my hand, but I couldn't feel it. My brain wasn't even angry anymore. It was quiet, cold, focused. There were no more doubts, no room for excuses, no space for forgiveness. I backed up all the footage to a hard drive. I made copies. I uploaded everything to a secure cloud server. I wasn't just gathering evidence anymore. I was building a fortress around myself, a wall of undeniable proof. I needed this protection, not just for legal reasons, but for my own sanity. That night, when I got home, I was a ghost. I hugged the kids. I ate the dinner Melissa had made. I asked about her day. She smiled and said it was uneventful. Her lies came so easily now. As she talked, I watched her face, every blink, every fake laugh, and I wondered how long she'd been able to fool me so effortlessly. But she didn't know. She didn't know that I'd seen her secrets from every angle, heard every word, and watched every movement. And she sure as hell didn't know that I was done pretending. By the time Friday came around, my decision was made, forged in the cold fire of her betrayal. There would be no yelling, no screaming, or throwing things. I wouldn't even tell her I knew. That would give her too much power. It would let her twist the story, cry her crocodile tears, and pull the kids into the vortex of her lies. I was going to let her hang herself with her own rope. That morning, I left for work like any other day. I packed my bag, kissed the kids goodbye on their foreheads, and paused at the door. "I might be late getting home," I told Melissa. She smiled, a placid, untroubled expression. "Don't work too hard." I watched her for a second longer than usual, searching for any flicker of guilt, any shadow in her eyes. There was nothing. She didn't notice, or maybe she did and just didn't care. In my truck, I made a call. It was to a buddy of mine, a former cop who now ran a private security firm. "I need someone," I said, my voice flat and even. "I need someone to sit across the street from my house with a camera." He didn't ask a lot of questions. He was a professional. "What time?" I gave him everything. The time frames, the man's description, the angle I wanted. I didn't just want the inside footage anymore. I wanted her lover caught walking into my house in broad daylight, smiling, comfortable, like it was just another visit. I needed the outside proof to seal the inside evidence. "And one more thing," I added, the words tasting like acid. "I'm going to leave the front door unlocked for them." It sounded crazy, I know, but I wanted to eliminate any possible excuse. I wanted to capture how natural, how routine this was for them, how confident they were that I didn't exist in their world. I spent the rest of the day pacing in my office, unable to sit still. My phone was on my desk, volume turned up. Around 11:47 a.m., it buzzed. A message from my guy. "He's here." Walked in like it's his damn house. I didn't reply. I just stared at the words, feeling something inside me finally shift from pain to a cold, hard certainty. I waited. The hours crawled by. Around 1:30 p.m., another message. "He's leaving." My guy caught it all on camera. Him coming in, him walking back out. I called him. Send me everything, I said. There was a pause on the other end. You sure you want to see it all, Tom? I already have, I told him, and hung up. That night, I came home early. Melissa looked up from the couch, a little surprised, but she smiled anyway. Hey, you're back early. Yeah, I said, taking off my coat. Slow afternoon. We ate dinner like always. The kids chattered about school. Later, she leaned on my shoulder as we watched television. But I wasn't there. Inside, I was already gone. Because tomorrow morning, I would be calling a lawyer. And when I showed him what I had, this whole charade was going to burn to the ground. Saturday morning was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels fake, stretched thin over a terrible truth. The sun was leaking through the blinds, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The only sound was the hum of the fridge. Melissa was in the kitchen making coffee, humming some cheerful tune, a woman with a clear conscience. I watched her. She looked so normal. The woman I had married, the mother of my children. But now, I couldn't look at her without seeing the man in the gray hoodie. I couldn't look at her without seeing her close the bedroom door behind him. I couldn't look at her without hearing the way she laughed with him when she thought no one was listening. I had the footage ready, every camera angle, synced and edited together into a single damning narrative on my tablet. I had a copy on a flash drive in my jacket pocket, another in the glove box of my truck, and a third in a cloud folder only I could access. I was taking no chances. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, sipping her coffee, scrolling through her phone like it was any other weekend. I waited until the kids had gone to their friend's house down the street, until the house was empty except for the two of us and the lie that sat between us. Melissa, I said. My voice was calm, cold. It didn't sound like my own. She looked up, a flicker of surprise in her eyes at my tone. What's wrong? I didn't say anything. I just slid the tablet across the table and tapped the screen. The footage started playing. At first, she didn't understand what she was looking at. Just a familiar, grainy security feed. Then the man appeared, entering our house, walking through our hallway. Her face registered confusion. Then he entered our bedroom, and she followed him, smiling that intimate smile. The blood drained from her face. She looked from the screen to me, her eyes wide, her mouth open, but no sound coming out. Keep watching, I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. And she did. She watched herself close the door. She watched the timestamps click by. She watched the full weight of her double life unfold in damning silence. Her hands, which had been holding her coffee mug, were now trembling in her lap. When the final clip ended, I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The truth was a third person in the room with us, suffocating the air. She finally spoke, her voice a tiny, broken whisper. It's not what you think. Don't, I said, cutting her off with a single, sharp word. Don't lie, not now. Her eyes filled with tears. I felt nothing. I didn't mean for it to happen, she stammered. I didn't know how to stop. I stared at her, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a strange sense of clarity. The confusion, the hope, the pain, it was all gone. I'm filing for divorce, I said, the words simple and final. I already have a lawyer. He has everything. The videos, the timeline, the names, it's all documented. She covered her mouth with her hand, a choked sob escaping. I kept going, my voice a merciless monotone. You brought him into my house, into my bedroom, around my kids. You lied to my face every single day. I'm done. The silence that followed was suffocating. She tried to reach for me across the table. I stood up, pushing my chair back. You don't get to cry now, I said, turning away. You already made your choice. This is just the part where you finally see what it cost you. And with that, I left the room, leaving her alone with the silent, flickering screen and the ruins of the life she had destroyed. I couldn't stay in that house. Not that night. After what I'd seen, after everything I'd heard, being under the same roof with her felt like trying to breathe underwater. I packed a bag, a few changes of clothes, my laptop, my phone. There was no dramatic exit, no shouting match. Just the quiet, definitive sound of the front door closing behind me. The kids were still at their friend's house, and I thank God for that. They didn't need to see their mother's world collapsing or hear the cold finality in my voice. They deserved better than the mess we had made. The next morning, I came back. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, our bed, waiting for me. Her eyes were red and swollen, her face pale. She looked like a stranger. I didn't sit down. I didn't move closer. I stayed by the door a safe distance away. I talked to a lawyer, I said, my voice as cold and clear as the morning light. It's time to file. She looked up, her mouth slightly open, as if to protest. I didn't let her speak. It's going to be done right. Professionally. I gave him everything. Proof, dates, recordings. He knows what to do. Her lips started to move. Wait, Tom, please. Can we just talk before you do this? You don't have to make a decision like this overnight. I shook my head slowly, a deep, weary sadness settling in my bones. I'm not making this decision overnight, Melissa. I made it the second I saw you walk him into our bedroom. I made it when I heard you laugh about how predictable I was. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. You don't get to rewrite this now, I continued, my voice unwavering. You made your choices. You brought him into my house, into my life. You lied to my face every single day. I was just the guy taking out the trash and paying the bills while you played pretend. Tears welled up in her eyes again. I was lost, she whispered, her voice cracking. I didn't know what I was doing. He was just there. You were always working, always tired. I felt alone. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that held no humor. That's funny. I felt alone too. I just didn't cheat. I didn't stop loving you, she whispered, a desperate, last-ditch plea. You stopped respecting me, I said, and you don't come back from that. She broke down then, the real, racking sobs of someone whose world has irrevocably ended. The crying, the shaking, the whole performance. I watched for a second, feeling nothing but a vast, empty distance. Then I turned and walked out of the room. The divorce moved with brutal efficiency. My lawyer told me I had one of the cleanest cases he'd seen in years. There was no drama needed, no he said, she said. There were just facts, recorded in high definition with crystal clear audio. Her lawyer tried to push back. They claimed it was a one-time mistake, that she was still a good mother, that she deserved another chance. They made noise about joint custody, about splitting the assets evenly. But the evidence killed all of that before it could even leave the ground. The videos were irrefutable. My detailed logs and the third-party surveillance footage sealed it. When we went to court, she barely looked at me. She sat at her table, her eyes fixed on the floor, like a student caught cheating on a final exam. I didn't feel satisfaction or triumph. I just felt quiet, like watching the final chapter of a long, sad book come to a close. The judge saw what I saw. He awarded me primary custody of the kids. She got every other weekend, supervised for the first 6 months. I didn't fight for the house. I didn't want to sleep in a place where I'd caught ghosts on camera. She could keep it, with its memories and its tainted spaces. What I wanted was peace. And my kids. They didn't know the full story. I would keep it that way for as long as I could. I told them that Mom and Dad weren't going to be living together anymore, but that we both still loved them more than anything in the world. My daughter cried. My son, with the heartbreaking innocence of a 7-year-old, asked if it was his fault. I knelt down, looked him in the eye and told him no, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. Kids are smarter than we give them credit for. I think they already knew something was broken, long before I said a word. In the months that followed, I moved into a small rental house on the other side of town. It was a simple place, clean and quiet. I took the kids to school. I made their lunches. We went for bike rides on the weekends. Slowly, painfully, I started to sleep through the night again. Melissa tried to reach out a few times. Texts, a voicemail or two, her voice thick with an apology she should have given months earlier. She wanted to talk, to explain. I never answered. There was nothing left to say. One night, about 6 months after everything ended, I was sitting on the back porch of my new house. The kids were inside, their laughter from a movie drifting through the open screen door. The air was cool and crisp, and for the first time in what felt like forever, it didn't hurt to breathe. The anger was gone. So was the sadness, and even the bitterness. In their place was just a quiet finality, a sense of being done. And that, honestly, felt better than anything else in the world.